We have it. So go ahead, Joanne.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to our Market Insights conversation this evening. I'm Joanne Toronto.
And I'm Tom Matthews. And we're going to just talk a little bit about the real estate market, specifically geared around the Middlesex County. We're both living in Concord, but we service all of the surrounding towns, and give you a broad stroke overview of what's going on in Massachusetts, and then dial into Middlesex County and then talk about what's causing this and what you should do. So Joanne, why don't you tell a little bit about what's going on in the Massachusetts market in the last 12 months?
Yeah, so I think, it's clear that something is happening, right? Something out of the ordinary, something extraordinary, in fact, is happening. And what we're seeing is a severe imbalance between buyer and seller supply, buyer demand and seller supply. So what it gives you the illusion of is, a shortage of inventory. But actually what we're seeing is that there are homes coming to the market, but they are just in such high demand, they don't stick around very long. And, year over year, we've seen some really large increases in pricing. And, that goes back to the basic law of supply and demand.
Yeah, I mean, in Massachusetts, the prices are up 17% over the last 12 months. But what's interesting is that you look at the average sales price is really high. And then the average listing price is really high and the average sales price is much lower. And so that indicates to us that people are really, the inventory that is sitting, the only inventory is sitting are properties that are priced too high. So the only inventory that's not selling are homes that are priced really high. In Middlesex County right now, you have fewer homes for sale, but you have more homes year to date that have sold than we had this time last year. So it looks like every weekend, when properties come on the market on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and by Monday or Tuesday, they're all sold. And the only ones that are sitting around are properties that are priced too high or the condition is terrible. So Joanne, why do we think there's so much demand in the suburbs? I mean, that's probably the biggest question that people ask. What's causing this imbalance?
Yeah, I think the obvious answer to that is that in part the COVID-19 pandemic has really shifted the whole idea of home, house, retreat, work, because your house is so many different things now, because it's where you sleep, it's your restaurant that you go out to eat at, it is your job, your office that you work at. For your kids, they may have been doing remote or hybrid schooling over the last several months since the beginning of the school year. And so it has really changed the definition of home. And
Yeah.
with that, I think, one of the phenomenons that's come from this is kind of this exit out of the city. And for us specifically, this exit out of Boston, where the suburban markets have just lit on fire because of the demand to get out of the cities. And, I don't know that that is specific to Boston, but something that I find really interesting is that it not only caused people to want to move, but I think it also, people who were on the fence or who had planned to move in the next, 1 to 3 years, really just kind of accelerated their time frame, because it just made sense to do so at this point. Last year during this, at this time, it was very hard to live in the city, especially if you don't have outdoor space, if you have children and not having places to go. I think that can be, really hard. And so it's understandable that people are coming out to the suburbs. And also, we just have we have this work from home thing that's been born out of the pandemic. And
I want to add something real quick, Joanne, because as we were talking about statistics about the price in Massachusetts being up 17% over the last 12 months, that takes into account the entire state, every county in the state. And Joanne and I pulled the Suffolk data, looking like specifically at condos. In the condo market in Boston, there is inventory. There's a buildup of inventory. Units are selling, but prices are down like $100,000 on average. And so you have Massachusetts data with prices up, even though Boston is down. And what a lot of people have told us is that they've left the city because of COVID, because their 1,000 square foot condo that was in the Back Bay that was awesome to live in, where they could walk to work and walk to restaurants and walk to bars and walk to everything.
The whole live, work, play.
Live, work, play is just not working when they have to live, work, and play in 1,000 square feet. and they're saying that they just need space. They want yards, but it's interesting. They don't want massive yards because they don't want to take care of all that. They want just like a nice quarter acre, half acre. Another thing that's really driving demand right now are low interest rates.
Yes.
We have seen historically low interest rates. I mean, back in January, you could get a 30-year fixed in 2.25, 2.5. The rates are up about 50 basis points since January 1st. So you're looking 2.75 to 3, but still, the money, the cost to get money financed is just so cheap that's driving people and giving them the ability to push their budget to buy more. You can go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that buying more is an important part of talking about the value of the suburban property, right? Because these buyers are equipped with, excellent employment. We are blessed to live in a very financially stable geography. And, these people have access to mortgages at super low interest rates. They have high incomes. And, that in and of itself has driven the prices up because people will pay more for a home that, is in tip-top condition, that they can just pack their bags and move in and make the transition and not have to worry about having people inside your house, because after all, we are still in a pandemic.
Yeah.
And, having people in your home is not ideal. And also the cost of materials, building materials, has skyrocketed over the last 12 months. So the cost of lumber is very high. The cost of labor is very high, especially in this part of the country. The cost of labor is very high. So it just causes inflation of all of these pieces that impact the housing market.
And Joanne, people were asking me the other day why lumber is so expensive.
Yeah.
And the reason that lumber is so expensive right now is that when COVID was shutting down manufacturing across the country in every profession, the lumber industry, they stopped production. And they thought, the CEOs, all the people thought that housing demand was going to go down. They thought people would be out of work. Stock market was down a year ago. And so what they did was they said, all right, we're going to stop production like everybody else. And when we resume, we're going to resume at half the capacity. And what happened was real estate went in the opposite direction. And so lumber and building materials were lagging behind. And right now, the National Association of Builders say that it's about $30,000 more to build a house today than it was this time last year. And those increased costs are driving more people to buy resale properties.
Agreed.
Because in the equation right now, the only thing that has remained low is the cost of financing dollars.
Yes.
Everything has gone up. And so that's why we're seeing this massive demand. Go ahead, Joanne.
That's why you're seeing people spend more on the homes that don't need work, because the materials are already in the house, and it's cheaper to finance the money over 30 years than to outlay cash, to build an addition or finish a basement and so forth.
And the other factor that we just want people to know about is there is massive liquidity in the marketplace right now. There were a lot of people that bought Tesla and other stocks in last March who made a ton of money last year, bought Bitcoin. They bought all kinds of assets that have skyrocketed, and they're now rotating that asset out of the stock market or Bitcoin into real estate. So you're seeing a lot of cash in the marketplace, because what a lot of people know is that you can buy a piece of real estate with cash. And if you go to a bank within 90 days of closing, you can still get a prime rate. So you can buy it with cash and then get a mortgage at that prime rate, and it's not considered a refinance. So those are kind of all the factors that are driving demand. Now we want to talk a little bit about why is there so much shortage? Why is there this imbalance? So Joanne, you want to touch on that a little bit?
I mean, the most obvious thing that I think on a macro level that any economist would look at in the greater Boston area is, lack of new construction.
Right.
And there has been a lot of new construction, most of which was happening in Boston over the past several years. And we have a very densely populated geography. So land is scarce. There's not, large parcels that are being split up to make them into neighborhoods. Most of Eastern Massachusetts is pretty densely populated and developed already. So it goes without saying that the lack of new construction is not going to be a problem that we can solve. I think the halo effect from, urban living, where people are able to move out and the prices of real estate, grow in value as you are closer to the city, but that halo effect spills over outside of those parameters. So, lack of new construction is going to be something that plagues our geography. But also, I think that this work from home environment may allow people to live further away from the city, and we could get some, another construction boom, in the not so distant future.
The other big driver for the lack of inventory right now are baby boomers. Typically, what happens in Concord, Sudbury, Wayland, Acton is that baby boomers, last kid graduates from high school. They may wait a year or two, and then their house is on the market and they're heading to Boston, or they're heading to Florida, or they're heading somewhere else. And what we're finding right now, because of COVID, a lot of these baby boomers are locked in place. Their kids are going to school remotely, and they're like, we can't move. So that's cutting down probably 20% of the inventory. And then you have this kind of the silent generation after that, who are in their mid 70s, early 80s, who right now would be selling their home and moving into retirement homes. And because of COVID, with all the tragedies that hit last year in the retirement homes, those folks are saying, I'm going to age in place. I'm going to modify my house. I'm going to have an architect in. I'm going to have a builder in. I'm going to turn my dining room into a master bedroom on the first floor. And they're staying in place. And between those two demographics, that's about 30% of the inventory in the suburban marketplace that is no longer available. And then the third factor that we talk about is that a lot of the clients that Joanne and I work with, young families who have children who want to move up, and they're having trouble finding that move up house, and they are petrified to put their house on the market until they find something else. So it's creating a log jam. Because Joanne and I were talking to a client yesterday, and we're like, sell your house, you make a ton of money, and go live with your parents. And they're like, been there, done that, not doing it again.
Yeah. And I think this kind of logjam concept is not new. It's just exacerbated right now because, short-term housing is very, very expensive in our area. I did a short-term lease last year at a place, and I won't tell you what the rent was, but it was more than my mortgage. And, we needed a place to live while we were doing a renovation to our house. And it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable being in an apartment with two kids and not having any place to go. So this is, again, kind of wrapping back into the pandemic conversation that, moving into temporary housing is something that we used to recommend people do all the time. It was a great, and especially where we live in a place that offers several different housing communities that do, month to month leasing. It was a great option for people. But I think with the limited mobility, the work from home, the kids, are they in school? Are they not in school? I think that part of, all of these factors together make that option very, very unattractive. And people just don't want to do it.
Right.
So, and I can't blame them, right? Because, going into temporary housing is uprooting your family. Depending on the age of your kids, it can be very disturbing to their routines. And it's very hard unless you can buy a home, without selling your existing one. It's very hard to make a move in this market. So I think that's a whole other population of people that are like, if the opportunity presents itself, like, we can do it. But they're almost not even buyers. They're like shoppers right now.
And, I would say for people that are watching this, that are thinking, they're sitting on the sidelines saying, I want to sell my house, but I don't know if it's safe to sell my house with COVID-19. I just want to address that because it's an important question. Joanne and I actually posted a coffee with Tom and Joanne today where we talked about this topic. But what we are recommending to people is, if you want to sell your home in COVID, is We prep it ahead of time, get it all photographed, do 3D tours so that people can kind of go to your home once and then sit in their underwear in the middle of the night and go through your home with the and fall in love with it. But we recommend to clients, because of the velocity of the market, if you price it right and market it right, you can put it on the market on a Wednesday and be pretty darn sure you'll have offers on Tuesday. So we're recommending to people to go to Airbnb, get out of town for a couple of days, and then have people into the home with wearing masks, gloves, booties, doing really controlled showing so there's not a lot of people in your house, and having a safe environment so that you can sell your home, because a lot of people are nervous about selling in this environment, and they shouldn't be at this point, because if you're in a position where you own a second home or have some place to go and you've been in one of these suburban markets, and I say we're in Concord, Acton, Sudbury, Lincoln, Wayland, one of those surrounding towns. If you're there, you should jump on the opportunity to sell right now, because I feel like this is potentially a once in a lifetime opportunity to sell. And, we want people to know that information because prices are up. But also, then the question is, how do I buy in this market? Right, Joanne?
Right.
We're working with a lot of buyers. We were fortunate enough to get 3 of them accepted offers this past weekend. And what's it taking, Joanne, to get an accepted offer in this market?
I think it's taking strategy, right? So in a competitive market, in any competitive market, you want to be working with an agent who understands, the tools that are available. And, I was working with one client this past weekend and we made an offer on something, and they were asking questions about, making really aggressive offers, like waiving home inspection and waiving financing and, doing pre-home inspection, escalation clauses. And, for this particular client, that toolbox, this property that they were looking at, those tools in the toolbox were not appropriate for that particular scenario. But the point I want to make is that, you have to understand what the demand is in the market. And unfortunately, there are, a number of agents that don't understand the demand because they're not working both sides of the industry, meaning working with buyers and sellers. So, when you are an agent and you have a listing, you have to anticipate the demand. Right now, it's very hard to predict what the sale price will be, but there are a lot of tools that you can use. And, something that we like to do is figure out what your risk tolerance is, because when you're buying a home, this is going to be a place that you're going to put your head on the pillow. It's going to be one of the biggest assets in your financial portfolio. And what we need to understand is, what is your comfort level? Because there are very few things in a home that can't be fixed with money. So, when it comes to home inspections, most things can be fixed, right? But it will cost money, and it has to, you have to come to terms with what money means to you and what time means to you. So there are some really difficult high-level conversations right now. And we don't necessarily recommend the most aggressive way. The most aggressive way to get your offer accepted is to waive your home inspection, waive your financing, close, in 30 to 45 days or whenever the seller wants you to, and, basically no contingencies. So, but that's not comfortable for everybody, right, Tom?
And it's not the right move. Like I put a house on a contract this weekend and we have a financing contingency. And I said to the broker, I said, you know what, we'll give you a great price, but my buyer's just not willing to take that risk. And if you're not willing to put a little risk in the game, then we just can't come together. And he's like, I'll take a little risk. Let's put it together. Everyone, they have good jobs. It's all about, working together. One of the things that Joanne and I have built our business on is giving people sound fiscal advice. And so we're conservative by nature, so we're not going to be here trying to tell people to be uber aggressive. I would actually argue that, or say that we've had a slow period because this last few months has been so crazy. And we've seen, we don't know when the movie's going to end, but we've seen this movie before. At some point the market will shift. And if you grossly overpay for a property and then get relocated because of work or get a job change or something, you could find yourself upside down by several $100,000s.
Yeah.
And so we really go into depth about having deep conversations about what people's priorities are. Because although it's an amazing market for sellers, it's a challenging market for buyers because there's so much imbalance. And
But
we spend, go
I
ahead.
also think for buyers though, it's interesting because you have the opportunity to spend whatever your budget is, right?
Right,
And not every home is going to kind of like check the box of everything you want in your budget. But one thing that I do want to talk about is that it is okay to overpay for a home,
true.
if it's in your financial profile that you can do so, because sometimes time is more important than money.
Right,
And I think for some buyers in this market, time is more important than money because, even for the city folks, they've lost 12 months of being able to be right like outside in their own space. There's something about, you know, living in a suburban place and going outside, in your pajamas and not needing to worry about it because you're in your own backyard.
right.
So I think that there are buyers in this market that time is more important than the money. And going back to the massive liquidity of the stock market run up, I think that that's a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Is that there's extra money in the market right now or extra money in people's accounts that they can spend it. And if you want to change your lifestyle, how do you put a price on that when you're in a very uncomfortable situation? So I
Um,
think that's an important point.
I think it's
Um,
a great point. I appreciate you bringing it up.
yeah, and I think, while we are very financially conservative when it comes to making offers with our buyers, we also kind of give them, the sky's the limit. This is
Yeah.
about you. This is about your family and what's right for you guys right now. And if you are planning to stay in this house for, 20 years, then, maybe it doesn't matter if you can afford the sale price. So it's not necessarily timing the market is something that Warren Buffett can't do. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I always say, I'm like Joanne and I are advocates. Like, we'll give you a range of where we think the house should sell for. But if you want to go outside that range, and that's your decision, and we're totally comfortable with it. Our big
yeah,
thing is we just want to make sure that you're doing it because that's what you want to, and not because we're telling you you should or have to. So I want to just pivot real quick, Joanne. We've talked about buyers, we've talked about sellers. Let's talk a little bit about, what can homeowners do if they don't want to sell? How can they take advantage of the climate we're in right now? So I think that's an important topic for people.
yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that is important to understand is that home equity lines of credit are a great asset to have as a homeowner. So even if you don't plan to use it, it's a great, great thing to have in place for the time that you do decide that you need to have money. Because right now, the value of your property is likely at an all-time high or close to it, depending on how long you've lived there. And the reality is that you can leverage your own equity in your property as a line of credit. And a lot of people use a line of credit for, home improvement projects like redoing a kitchen or bathrooms. But a lot of people also use it just as a safety net, right? It doesn't cost you anything to have it open. And I think that's a common misconception, is that it doesn't cost you anything to have it open. You can get, immediate access to your equity in your home. And depending on how much equity that is, it could be the key that enables you to buy another property without selling the one that you're in.
I mean, because, here's the big thing right now is that, interest rates are low, like mortgage interest rates, but credit card rates are still high. You get a credit card and the interest rate is 15%. But, if you're in your home and you're not planning to sell and you're like, oh, I wish I could take advantage of this great market. Well, you can. You can get, most banks, they want you to have at least 20% equity in your home. And then after you get past that 20% equity, so just, hypothetically, if you had a $500,000 house, that first $100,000 of equity has to be there. And say your mortgage is $200,000, you could then get a loan of $200,000. So between a line of credit for $200,000, it just sits there. And if you wanted to use that at any point, you can, and then you just pay on it basically on mortgage rates. And so it just gives people great liquidity. People have used, you have to use it with responsibility. But say you wanted to buy yourself a little ski chalet or something like that when the market dips a little bit, you could become a cash buyer. and then you can Airbnb that property and pay yourself back. But it's just a great way for folks who own property to take advantage of these high valuations. The other thing you can look at is doing a refinance. So refinancing your mortgage to get yourself these low rates, or you can do a refinance and do a cash out. It's called a cash out refinance. You don't have access to the lowest interest rates, but if you needed some liquidity, it would give you access to all of that equity in your property. And it's crazy with rates as low as they are. $100,000 when you amortize it over 30 years right now is costing, I think, about $400 a month. So, to be able to access that equity and have access, to $100,000 for $400 a month, that is a powerful tool. If you're owning a home, don't want to sell, but wish you had a little bit more cash to do some projects around the house, pay off some debts, whatever. It's a great tool and great resource to be able to do that.
And it's quite astounding how many homeowners don't actually have the line of credit in place, because I think people get the concept of home equity loan and home equity line of credit confused, because a home equity loan is like a second mortgage. You're taking out a loan against your house. It's at a fixed rate. It is a principal and interest payment, versus a home equity line of credit is just that. It's like a credit card. It has a very high balance on it. You get a checkbook that you can use with it, and the payments on it are only interest until you reach the conversion point. So typically you have 10 years where you can use the balance up and down, up and down, up and down, and then it will fix into something that's a stable loan. But that home equity line of credit really doesn't cost anything to get. It's crazy not to have one.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered a lot of the topics that we wanted to talk about, Joanna. I know we have a couple of people on the call, and we just want to open it up to some questions and answers. If anyone has any specific questions, we'll be happy to answer them at this time. Otherwise, we'll wrap up because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Does anyone have any questions tonight? Hearing none. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending tonight. We want to we appreciate it, and we'll
And if
try and